You ever wondered why you don't follow through? I can tell you. And even better, I can fix it. The best part is you won't even have to become a better person in the process. Not because you're so great there's nothing to improve, more because why would you improve yourself when it's much easier to improve your strategy? But why should you trust me? You shouldn't. Well, to prove I know something you don't about follow through,
I'm on my way to London, not that one, the one in Nebraska, to get a $1,000 tramp stamp tattoo of a stranger's name.
not some fake temporary tattoo either. We're talking about the real deal here. I've already paid the deposit. The tattoo will occur by the end of this video, and as it stands, I don't even know what font they're gonna use. If it's Comic Sans, I'm gonna flip a table. Part 1, why you don't follow through. By the way, I'm recording these notes in a small town gas station bathroom instead of outside because it's literally -30 out there and I pride myself on not dying. Remember that time you told everyone you were gonna do that crazy thing and you totally didn't? 100% whiffed it, weren't even close? Yeah. That was devastating. You might think you know why you failed. Something came up, life got in the way, the sun was in your eyes, but I promise you don't. All those reasons you gave are excuses. The real reason you didn't seem to follow through has nothing to do with whether you did or didn't actually do what you planned to. Instead, it has everything to do with the fact that you actually told everyone what the plan was. Following through is a lot like baking a cake. It's not, but let's pretend it is for the sake of the video. Say you tell everyone, I'm gonna bake a cake tomorrow and bring it in for everyone to share. If the next day you do in fact show up with cake, much to your chagrin, everyone will accept this as basically the bare minimum. What, no party drinks to go with? Now my throat's gonna be dry. After all, it is what you promised. They might be ungrateful cretins, but they are, to be fair, ungrateful cretins of your creation. And if you don't bring them free cake, well, they'll be very disappointed and possibly even mad that you didn't provide them with free baking. Why? Because you opened your mouth. That's why. And we all know what happens when you open your mouth now, don't we? But if you showed up one day, unannounced, with fresh homemade cake, why, at that exact moment, you could claim to be an angel from heaven and they would have no reason not to believe you. I can hear the more pedantic of you arguing that that has nothing to do with follow through and everything to do with perspective management. And you're right on the money, but also your voice is annoying when you say it. I'm not here to actually teach you how to follow through on everything you say you'll do because you already know the solution to that little problem, and it's to become a better person. And self-improvement as advice is the racing equivalent of telling someone, have you tried being faster? Oh yeah, I haven't really thought of that before. Let me put it at the top of my list for next time, thanks. Instead of teaching you how to be faster so you win the race fair and square, I'm gonna teach you how to cheat so that the first place medal is already around your neck before the starting gun even goes off.
Part 2, shut your big fat mouth.
You shouldn't be talking about what you haven't done yet unless you can speak in prophetic perfect tense. Pathetic perspex what now? Prophetic perfect tense is a technique used in literature, mostly of the religious variety, which describes future events as things that have already been and gone. Why would they do that? It's because they're so certain of the outcome, which may not arrive for centuries, that it was like it already happened. Sadly, both you and the sports bettors who are certain their next parlay is a lock do not have this ability. The prophets are all dead and we have replaced them with orange traffic signs promising that the road works ahead.
Yeah, I sure hope it does.
So how can we manufacture situations in which our announcement of intentions are so certain of success that it's like we're practically speaking in prophetic perfect tense? The answer lies in a grift taught in PR agencies globally. Lie, just a little bit. Make all the facts true and then ever so subtly twist the timeline, the structure, the height from which you actually jumped, and suddenly you're pulling off the impossible with absolute confidence because of this one simple key. I believe it was Sun Tzu in his New York Times bestseller The Art of War who said, if you ain't moving in silence, you ain't moving at all. He didn't actually say this, but I like to believe he did. Now let me be clear, your conniving will still take effort. This isn't a game where zero input gets you maximum rewards. After all, you're not rich, and if you do happen to be rich, I have a thrilling opportunity to purchase the Eiffel Tower. Just email me privately about it. Maximum return only happens when you already have the world at your fingertips. This is why the easiest way to have $1 million by the end of the year is to start with 5. But what I am saying is that with a little bit of trickery, you can make the simplest achievement seem like scaling Mount Everest. To that end, I have 4 strategies, each better than the last, in a classic bid to retain your ever-shrinking attention span, which, if adhered to, will assure that people believe your follow-through rate is beyond astonishing. As a side bonus, you'll also seem much more competent than you actually are. You might be wondering why you need these backhanded methods if you, like most regular people, describe yourself as a pretty decent human being who doesn't need to lie and backstab to create a false impression, and I'd agree. On the other hand, you are still here, aren't you? Let's chalk it up to morbid curiosity and move on. The other answer is that in actuality, you do need these techniques, specifically if you just so happen to be an artist. My condolences. Which is who these field notes are for in the first place. Being an artist is almost entirely predicated around perspective management. This is doubly true when your creations are not based around the virtuosic nature that it takes to make such art. I'm not here to debate the quality of such works, by the way. I'm only here to point out that the skill most successful abstract painters are best at isn't painting, it's marketing. Let's get into the first strategy for faking follow-through. If you play it correctly, it has the highest possible rewards, but also, if you fail, the highest risk. In life, those two tend to follow each other around like the most toxic codependent relationship you've ever laid eyes on. Strategy number 1. watering a plastic plant. The system is simple. Whatever you're working on, finish it silently and without mention beforehand. This will no doubt be difficult for those of you who require gratification for every little thing you do, but just try to push through by imagining the payoff. Once the work is done, you could release it into the world without fanfare, or you could up the ante. Announce that you're about to undertake a massive challenge of creation. Then, pull the people along an elaborate story of effort, challenge, and triumph as you work towards an impossible goal that in fact has already been completed. This way, you can raise the stakes as high as you want without any fear of the possible blowback. My favorite example of this is the album Above Club by We Are the City. The Canadian indie rockers, R.I.P., announced in 2015 that they would be live streaming the creation of an entirely new album. They would record in a basement in Serbia, and the second it was done, the stream would end and the album would be released. The stream began, and the three artists appeared to immediately lose their minds. What followed was a hazy world of indie myth and legend, which culminated in their landlord coming down, trashing their gear, stealing a laptop, and twisting the live stream camera. As you've probably already surmised based off of the entire rest of this video, everything I just described didn't actually happen. It was performance art, brilliant, abstract, fabricated storytelling designed to engage an audience and make their album even more than it already was. As a result of their antics, they got press coverage plus radio interviews on national broadcasts, and they hadn't even left their hometown. There was a problem though. Some of the people smelled a rat. In the final climactic moment of the falsified live stream, viewers began to suspect that the entire thing might be a farce. Too many unexplained moments compiled to leave some feeling cheated, causing them to withdraw their support from the band. This was support which would have easily been given had they simply released an album like Normal. But Normal was never enough for We Are the City, and I don't believe it should be enough for any artist at all. Risks must be taken, even if in this case the risk was the possibility that people might find out they hadn't actually taken the risks they told everyone they had, a confounding sentence I'm certain, but one I wholeheartedly believe. As artists, we are all telling stories and nothing more, not because stories are inconsequential, but because there is nothing more than stories. I'm just gonna pause while these toilets flush for no apparent reason. However, the danger of alienating your audience should they feel they have been led unfairly into your story is considerable. Aside, this first strategy may make it seem like I'm supportive of the many artists who pretend to be something they're not. I don't want you to conflate my words, so I'm going to spell it out clearly. I am. For instance, I'm not actually a grifter. I hate lying and have a deeply ingrained moral code which prevents me from shoplifting even from major corporations who deserve it deeply. Or do I? There will always be artists who do things like falsify their poverty to try and legitimize their art. I am one of them, as I was actually born in South Africa on my father's uranium mine. As a point of fact, in these field notes I'm only seeking to catalog the techniques that are and will continue to be used in the artwork. It's foolish to pretend these practices do not exist simply because you may not agree with them. There is no artistic Geneva Convention, and to enter a playing field without being aware of the techniques your competitors and even compatriots may be using is simply naive. Every tool, however, does have its own repercussions. Every deceit will eventually be outed, and when it is, you better have a damn good reason to justify it or you'll be thrown to the wolves. With that in mind, let's move on to the much safer strategy number 2, scaling Mount Everest.
I made it to London.
Don't fake the follow-through, simply fake its magnitude. Pop, pop. Take a simple, completable task and gild that lily so heavily that even the King of England would be proud to ride in such a vessel. In the business, this is called smoke and mirrors, creating illusions of grandeur. You're forced to see this every day in advertising campaigns which promise the purchase of a single item will change your life. It won't. And you might think those Coca-Cola hawkers invented the technique, but in reality, this is a tool stolen from the traveling carny. Bandit packs of bards with candy cane-coated tents of authority who promise sword swallowing and lion taming, without mentioning that the swords were all retractable and the lions were already tame. Every dentist with a picture of them atop Mount Everest has utilized this technique. Sure, back when 100 yards of rope and some canvas pants were all you had, scaling Everest was quite the achievement. But now, if you've got a spare 10K to drop and a rough familiarity with the concept of going for a walk up a hill, you too can have your gear carried by a determined and underpaid Sherpa while you wait in rush hour traffic at the top to get a selfie and get out of the death zone. And every time they tell that story afterwards, they conveniently forget to mention the Sherpa. Presentation is everything. The action, very little. PR experts call this perception manipulation, but I prefer to call it deceit and trickery. Not because I think we shouldn't do it, but more because I would rather sound like a pirate than a business manager. This choice as well is designed around the slippery world of PR smoke and mirrors, but we can discuss that more outside of class. The advertising world has taken from the artist its deft tongue and habit for making fallacious claims, and we must steal it back. As an added aside, it's worth noting that in terms of artists making things up to add heightened awareness of whatever they're making, it's possible that follow-through isn't even as important as you might first imagine. Sufjan Stevens, beloved sad boy, once claimed he was going to write an album for every single American state. His first two albums were for Michigan and Illinois respectively, garnered quite the acclaim as the beginning of a geographical magnum opus of sound. But 15 years have come and gone with no further state albums, and Sufjan himself has essentially admitted it as a hoax. Regardless, the music persisted because it is, at its core, a quality work of art. Nowhere near as many eyes would have been set on it in the first place if it weren't for his strategic, illegitimate claims, but none of them would have stayed if the product he did provide wasn't the real deal. Soon enough, the bombastic claims faded away, and what remained was a dedicated fan base. All of this is to say, feel free to create as much confetti and tinsel as you want when you announce the launch of your creation into the ether, but as you do so, remember, none of those eyes which were so easily drawn to spectacle will remain if you do not provide them with some kernel of truth to hold on to by the end of the celebration. Faking grandeur is a tactic I'm quite familiar with. After all, it's one I've used, most recently, on you. In New York, nearly 6 months ago, I made the claim that I was going to write the longest English poem of the 21st century. I had, in point of fact, not done it yet, but I knew something that most didn't. It would be incredibly easy for me to follow through on this claim because I had created an environment in which, in order for me to fail, I would have to be eaten by an untamed lion. An unlikely event, I admit, but I never let my guard down, just in case. I've been a street busker for most of my life, and have lived almost exclusively off of writing on-demand poems for the past 3 years. Strangers approach me, give me any subject at all, and I write them a full poem in under 2 minutes. I know I can complete this job satisfactorily, because if I couldn't, I would be dead. In order to further hedge my bets, I manufactured qualifications so specific that it was conceivable I might even complete them in a singular day. Let's break it down. To write the longest poem ever would have been impossible. That distinction goes to the Mahabharata, which is 4,000 years old and 1.8 million words long. So I added a further specification, the longest English poem. Also unlikely. A poem called King Alfred, published in 1841, is 130,000 lines long and took 40 years to write. The nice thing about these poems is that they're both incredibly old, which led to my third distinction, the longest English poem of the 21st century. The 21st century sounds like it covers quite a gap, but in fact is only 24 years to date, which narrows the challenge window considerably. A quick search on Wikipedia's list of the longest English poems revealed that there were in fact only 4 possible contenders. Sadly, their line count wasn't public knowledge, so I had to do a little more digging. I reached out to John Greenan, who wrote 3 of the 4 aforementioned poems. He got back to me within a day and provided some crucial information as to whether or not my poem had actually crossed the finish line. If it's 9,000 lines, it's by no means the longest poem of the century. I can name a couple that are double that length, but yours sounds unique in many other ways, and in terms of end-to-end length, I think your supporters may be correct. To the untrained eye, this may be seen as a devastating blow, but the practiced grifter knows the answer is staring you right in the face. Without missing a beat, I changed my descriptor from the longest English poem of the 21st century to the longest physical poem of the 21st century. An even easier claim to make, since literally no one is making extended scroll poems right now. Not exactly in vogue, is it? In the end, there would have been 2 possible ways to title my coming literary Herculean feat. Either the longest physical poem of the 21st century, or doing the easiest version of my job for 9 days straight. I say it's the easiest version of my job because I actually got to write what I wanted to for once instead of having to take requests. It did take only 9 days to complete the poem, and if we're honest, the last day was mostly wrap up and an early lunch, so more like 8. As I'm sure we can all agree, that second title doesn't sound very impressive. No one throws you a party when you just do your job. But they might if you simply find out what hyper-specific record you're breaking by just doing the same thing as always. Truthfully, I didn't even care about the size of the poem. The point was never the size of it. What was important was why I was writing it. The government was harassing artists and removing them from public spaces, thereby depriving them of their livelihood. And what the poem was about. An in-depth look at the inherent need for the vagrant bard and the oral tradition of the little guy. But that's just a poem about some dirty dreamers, and if I've learned anything, is that no one cares about your heartbeat until you've convinced them that it's pumping the Morse code for how to get rich quick. The follow-through in its grandeur, then, is in this case all about perception. Back to the cake analogy. If you really want to tell people ahead of time that you're baking a cake and have them still be impressed when it does arrive, just tell them you're making a world record-breaking cake by using some ingredient no one in their right mind would have ever used before, like, I don't know, iocane icing powder. The worst part of all is that while the actual action only took 9 days, now, like every good artist, I haven't shut up about it for 6 months straight. This is the desperate reality of follow-through no art maker wants to admit. I once overheard from a friend who overheard from another guy who probably knew what he was talking about, that being a musician is 10% making music and 90% prostitution. Making music doesn't make you money, selling music does. Fill in the discipline of your choice and you've got the quote at the top of your list for reasons you should give up on your dreams. So let's talk about that. Strategy number 3. I'm pretty sure the answer is a hut in the woods. The ultimate follow-through is disappearing completely. Consider the hermit. He probably wasn't a recluse hiding in the woods at the beginning of his life. Maybe he had a family, maybe he grew up, got a job, maybe it all went wrong, maybe it didn't. Either way, at some point he disappeared and never came back. No promises were made, no world records were broken. He simply absconded with all he held dear and dove headfirst into the void. Doesn't that sound nice? One day, and we are already en route, I will make a promise so astonishing you won't believe it. But in spite of yourself, you will support it financially because in the past I have done the impossible and later revealed it to only be tricks of the light. I will collect a larger sum of money than ever before, and just when you're beginning to expect a return on investment, I will disappear completely. This will be my final act. The main reason I haven't done it yet is because the financial gain of disappearing without providing products or services rendered hasn't been great enough to justify burning the false identity of character I've worked so hard to create. Don't worry, it'll be quite some time before we reach this pinnacle and you will have long forgotten this warning. But rest assured, we are on the trail towards that hallowed destination. Consider that at each point in your life. Every time you feel the pendulum shifting in that dramatic way it tends to, that someday it may be the best possible option for follow-through is to disappear entirely. However, if you find that not to be the case, there does remain a final strategy, the best of them all, but also the hardest to pull off. Strategy number 4, the Pied Piper and his pickled pies. I don't know, I never read the book.
How do you feel about getting the tattoo willy-nilly?
Oh, I'm so excited. This is gonna be so much fun.
Why are you doing this?
The best way to follow through is to trick other people to do it for you. Have you forgotten about that tattoo? The one I promised at the beginning of this video? $1,000 tramp stamp of a total stranger's name? Quite the claim, but I'm not nervous at all. In fact, I'm certain I won't regret the decision to get a $1,000 tramp stamp of a stranger's name because that price tag, a clean grand, that's not the amount the tattoo's gonna cost, that's the amount I'm being paid to get the tattoo. And what's even better, it's not even going on my body. The tattoo's going on my friend Todd. Everyone say hi, Todd. Did you just say hi to a digital screen? I believe in you, so I'm hoping you didn't, but if you did, come on, you're better than that. Don't let the technocrats run your life. To reiterate, I'm being paid $1,000 so that someone else gets a tattoo. Yep, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. Yeah, no, it's open. No, you can come in. It's fine. So the high-pressure stakes are actually incredibly low. They're practically on the floor. I've already been paid, and I'm not even the one who has to live with it on their body. And finally, of course, as you should have presumed, the follow-through's already occurred. This was obvious, but I still talked about it like it was going to happen because doing so adds a heightened sense of curiosity and suspense. We aren't speaking in prophetic perfect tense. We're inventing a new name for the age-old practice of artists and advertisers in which we pretend an upcoming task is going to be incredibly difficult to complete when it is, in fact, already a foregone conclusion. A future tense fallacy. But how on earth have I pulled this off? The part where someone else got a tattoo and I got paid. Simple. Through years of commitment, I've convinced those around me that I am in fact an artist, and a passionate one at that. As such, sincere and caring people have willingly fallen into the trap and gather around to support the scam. Willy-nilly, for instance, which by the way is the perfect name for a tramp stamp tattoo, donated generously to support the poem, and Todd has an affinity for weird tattoos and likes to use it to support artists. Both of them have fallen for my elaborate ruse on the long road to disappearing completely, and I cannot thank them enough. But all of this, my blustering and pageantry, my list of strategies, does not solve the one remaining mystery of how exactly do you actually force yourself to follow through? And the answer is, you don't. I have my quips and witticisms about the ways in which follow-through can be falsified, made to seem like more than it is through smoke and mirrors and outright lies, but at the core of it remains this same issue. The work must get done. We Are the City did make an album, just not when they said. Sufjan Stevens dropped 2, and they're hailed as some of the best evidence that depression has its benefits. I really did write a poem that was 240 feet long. The jury's still out on whether or not it's good, but only time can tell us that. For all the tools and trickery and artist fabrication you employ, you still have to follow through on something. How you present it is entirely up to you, but something, some kernel of truth must exist within your work, or else you will eventually be cast aside. I can fix this as well, but you're not gonna like it. If you can't follow through, the first reason usually claimed is that the boot of survival in capitalism is pressed squarely on your chest and leaving you no room to breathe. There's really no personal escape from that one except for years of drudgery. I've covered the main tactics in earlier notes, so let's move on to the second reason, which I think is even more common and even harder to grapple with. If you cannot force yourself to follow through, you must look within yourself and be honest. There is a chasm between who we think we are and who we truly are. On one side exists our perceived desires and impulses, those things we believe we are passionate about and for. And on the other side exists the truth. If you cannot bring yourself to follow through, perhaps you are forcing yourself to follow through on the wrong sort of thing entirely. Thought for food.